Hi, John. Why don't we start by you just kind of explaining that you're about to have a book come out in print and what it's called, and then I'd love it if you could read us one of the poems from the book.
Yeah, well, first of all, Terry, thank you for having me on. I'm John Fadely, and I'm a lifelong lawyer, corporate lawyer. I've spent more than half of my life in Asia and started writing poetry in 2019. Um, had no uh, plans for publishing a book, just would write poems in my spare time. Ended up um, also taking the ModPo course offered through the Kelly Writers House at UPenn, just as an online course that I took during the pandemic while, I was in Hong Kong at the time for long periods of time working, and my family was in the US. So I had extra time that I normally spend with my family that I was spending on poetry. So those two things just kind of came together. Oh, that and also there was some civil unrest, as you may know, in Hong Kong in 2019, 2020. That was kind of a trigger for me to start writing poems. I mean, there was a lot going on around us at that time, in a city that was normally just all about business, and that I'd lived in for, I guess, 15, 16 years before then. So big changes. So all those things came together. I started writing poems. The poems came together over the course of about 5 or 6 years into a book. I wasn't sure if I could organize them into a book, but somehow managed to do that. I ended up working with Autumn McClintock, who I met through Al Filreis, who runs the ModPo program. And Autumn has been like a great reader of my poems and sort of gave me a lot of encouragement along the way. So hats off to her. And I ended up winning this award for poetry by a small press in Washington State called Wandering Angus that has this imprint called Trail to Table. And that means this book is going to be published, they're telling me April next year. So I'm very excited about that and happy to read a few things from my book. I've set up a web page, a very basic web page called johnfadely.com. That's JOHNFADELY.com, where if anyone's interested in the book, you can just put your name in and I'll put you on my mailing list. So we get closer to the book's release date. I'll send you an email as part of my blast, and you can decide whether you want to buy the
Okay.
book.
And do you have a title for it?
It's called Before Leaving the Island. And um, just a sort of biographical note, I've, for some reason, spent a lot of my adult life on islands. I worked in Hong Kong for uh, 18 years. I'm currently working in Singapore. I worked in Japan for 3 years. I went to school in Manhattan. Um, at some point, it occurred to me that all these places are islands. So there you have it.
But now you're coming back to California, is that right?
That's right. Yes. At the end of this year, I'll be coming back to California, um, hopefully doing
And
the same
hopefully it will
thing.
not become an island.
Well, California better watch out. Once I move here, it might actually split off and become an island. And so apparently they're taking me back anyway. I don't know if they realize the risk, but yeah.
All right, great. So I'd love to hear The Laundry King. It's a really pretty on the page, uh, lots of spaces and different lines. So I'd love to hear it read. And if you want to set us up with, what it's about or anything, you can. But if you want to just read it, that'd be all right too.
Sure. I'd say just broadly, The Laundry King is a poem that I wrote about money and about laundering. So laundering not just money, but laundering other things as well. Everything from laundry to people. Laundering is something that's part of our lives, generally not one of the best things in our lives, but it's ubiquitous. And so this poem is about money and it's about laundering. So here goes. The Laundry King. Loose change scours the barrel, money emerging out of zero, a boast backed by nothing and everything's equivalence. I'm electrum pounded on an anvil. Now I'm cotton and ink. Now I'm decimalized. Now I'm alphanumeric strings. Mined from the current, surviving counterfeit runs debasement where a worn word I, the laundry king, tender for the coin clenched between your teeth to feed the washer with. Without paying me any mind, a woman opens the dryer door mid-tumble and scoops my load into a basket, disappears, then returns to dump someone else's clothes into the empty drum. Folding the laundry, I try on a sweatshirt from a school I've never heard of and wear it, still warm, out the door. I sing the dollar electric to Koina. What started white is gray, grayer, blued, laved, lighter, lavender, lighter, whiter, white. We must deal with our borders, leaky here in the kingdom of transmigration. The laundromat dog furrows his brow. Do I know you from before? I'm just passing through the wash, rinse, spin, and dry cycles to Koina. The following week, the dryer spins my clothes into cash, which I bind with rubber bands and slide roll by roll through a teller window where the same woman plucks a gold Buddha statue from a lineup and passes it across with gloved hands. Stepping outside, I see the storefront is changed from coin wash to Far East furniture and home accessories. Money is all over my brain at the cellular level, making change, and the difference is spreading. Everybody had to have one. A Buddha sitting, standing, or reclining, body his, faces ours. Not even Siam's artisans could keep up, or all of Siam's gold backstop this run on the banks of enlightenment. I don't want more coasters, stemware, decanters, pocket watches, playing cards, pendulums, scarves, lava lamps, or other novelty items. I don't want more microwave ovens, toaster ovens, pizza ovens, Dutch ovens, or coffee grinders. I don't want wood bowls for alms, bronze bowls for ringing in the mornings, miters, scepters, censers, saffron robes with matching sandals, or all the votive tablets in your stupas, vaults, and reliquaries. I don't even want your gilded icons and statues, serene, suffering, or smiling through enough gold foil to wrap myself in. Just give me your money. You can't take with you what outlives you, to Koina. Phrase, 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 spewing from my mouth like coins from a broken slot machine, like a distempered wind god blowing coin. When I return to Far East furniture and home accessories, the woman leads me into a room with three life-size gold Buddha statues and asks which one is real. Buddha number one has a slot at the top of his head, and the gold plating on Buddha number two is almost too perfect. As I linger in front of Buddha number three, he turns to flesh and says, Congratulations. Many pick the hollow ones. Have I chosen the path of enlightenment? No, but at least you haven't chosen piggy bank Buddha or drug smuggling Buddha. What does that mean? That you can no longer afford to have expectations. I count it, wager it, lend it on margin or without, sue for it, watch it multiply, count it. These tumble dryers, one mind rumbling. If time is money, then money must be time. If you can buy time, then you can buy money. If there are things money just can't buy, then there are things time just can't buy. I still haven't run out of change. Not yet. Not today. Money epistemology 1. I can't tell who has touched me any more than the dollar bill flapping between my fingers. Confession to the founding fathers staring out of our currency. You gave us a republic if we can keep it, and in return, we daily smear your somber faces with bacteria, viruses, yeast, fungi, cocaine, and trace amounts of heroin, morphine, and methamphetamine. We are truly sorry, and we humbly repent. When I returned a few days later in search of enlightenment, Far East furniture and home accessories has been converted into an internet data center. The woman answers the door, shouting above the whir of ventilation, "We've gone online, and Buddha, and all the Buddhas." Attachment to money, usura. Attachment to usura. I want my share, but they won't share shares. They scramble share into hears and shear shares when they hear I want my share, then burn sheared shares to ashes and residual R, and launder soft sea unseen under land to make cold hard cash. I get a letter, but no word, because R isn't R, and shares aren't cash unless laundered. Now I don't want my share no more, no more. Only letters laundered to words, me laundered to we, ash to cash. Money epistemology too. Mine these lines? I forget how to break my own encryption. A worn word for your coin to pay the power bill with. Through you, my medium, money talks of exchange in abundance, scarcity. Enough double talk, laundry king. Make yourself scarce before I stuff your mouth with gold. Trilemma. You can't have time, money, and things to spend it on. This is why, for the last person, there will be nothing to do with all that money but sleep on it. After the
That's
money's gone, barters, brutal equivalents, things for things, persons as things, life as a series of trade-offs. Launderer of soul, O laundry king, launder the K in trafficking, launder me lost, launder me found, launder me silent into sound. Step 1, cut along the dotted lines. Long pause, then a charge on your account. Step 2, declare a new currency.
wow, that's great.
Thank you.
I really like the trilemma part. Sorry, I got a little excited there. Let's hear a couple short ones now. That's really off. That was really great. Um, that really helped me understand it. Um, Burnt offering is one I'm curious about.
Sure. So burnt offering, I'll just say, in Chinese or folk religion, I think other religions too, is something that you burn, paper, into the other world. So with Chinese tradition, um, you want to feed the dead, you would burn something into the other world, paper that's, representative of food or something like that, or furniture, whatever. Um, to symbolically give something to someone in the next world, someone who's already passed on. So, burnt offering. If we'd been close enemies instead of friends, our cards drawn from an artless cut, and if to call you from afar, out of my thin hand, I flicked into the fire my final heart, on it would be scrawled, raise me once more, blind in your blaze, immolate or reignite my core.
Hmm. I'm getting
So,
father figure.
well,
Just,
this is a poem that I wrote about enemies, really. Or you could say maybe enemyship, right? So it's a relationship with someone who's a rival, not a friend, someone who isn't going to look out for your best interests, but may unintentionally be looking out for your interests in some way. Lots of people have said, you know, we need enemies, right? We need rivals. We need people to keep us on our toes. So this is kind of a poker construct that tries to talk about that topic as best as I could. I'm not sure um, I quite nailed it, but that was the idea.
hmm. Okay. I found I thought it was more personal, which was great. That's good. You made the enemy quite personal.
Well,
Um,
enemies are personal, sometimes at least as personal as friends are. So yeah, it's meant to come across as being personal. And ultimately I decided to use the you in there to express that.
Great, great. All right, let's try one more. At Front Royal.
Sure. I'll just say up front that Front Royal is a small town in the Shenandoah Valley in Virginia. So at Front Royal, stopping roadside at Front Royal, in white pages dangling from spiral coils, we found our name, line upon line, that same word, its own rhyme, lost later to genetic code, for I contain itinerant soil. We owe to God knows who, a burial ground where no marker could be found. But what does a name deciphered mean, if not in its deciphering? At Front Royal, I jotted down my namesake's address, and when I finally wrote, though he was a stranger twice my age, he wrote back promptly on the blank side of the page.
Interesting use of rhyme. Um, is the first what's going to be the first poem in the book? Do you know?
Yeah, it's a poem that is called Where I'm From.
Okay.
Um, and it's a very short poem, just to introduce this idea of sound as being a place where poet and reader can meet.
Do you have that one?
I do. Let me pull it up.
Is it short? It's short, you said.
It's very short, yeah.
Well, that'd be great because I haven't seen it, so I'll just hear it. It'll be great
Sure.
for sound.
Where I'm from isn't where I was born or any land, and I love the ocean, but it's not there, and that about covers it. Yet, when convulsed earth rings like a bell, a breathing sphere in oscillation, isn't it true that one wave hums where I'm from, and in that sound we meet?
No, really good. Well, thanks for these, and I'll try to make that available so that we can hear those poems again. Let's talk about process if you're ready for that. Man, I that last one that was really nice. That humming really was effective. Um, I would, I'm just going to jump straight into form and talk about form because, as we students of ModPo know, it's how you do it is just as important as what you say. Um, so what do you think, for example, in that last poem, there, how would you describe the form, and then what do you think it's doing?
Well, the poem itself is kind of humming. It has to create a hum a sound that draws the reader in. And, that's really all that that poem does in the end. So it doesn't need to be a long poem um, to get there. And so I thought it was a good poem to actually put at the very beginning, before the book really even starts, as an invitation to anyone who wants to pick the book up and read it, to try to
So
get
what's
them
what,
into the sounds on the page.
okay? And so, say the first place that you think the hum starts, that you purposely started that.
I'd say in the title, the word from, where I'm from,
Okay.
has a bit of a hum. And that isn't, that isn't really intentional, but as I worked the poem out, I was trying to find those sounds, and I think it starts there. Um, the title leads directly into the body of the poem. So
Hmm.
that also, I think, works a little better than maybe having a standalone title. The poem just moves right into itself. Again, it's meant to be an entry point into the book. Um, it also deals with this sort of conundrum that I think a lot of us, maybe all of us have, is we don't really know where we're from. I mean, it's sort of a philosophical problem, but you can kind of create where you're from insofar as art allows us to meet in a common kind of shared space if we want to spend the time and energy on that. And that's, poetry is just one of many art forms that can do that, right? So that's more or less the poem, at least as I conceived it.
Yeah, and it goes with the title of the book too, that before leaving the island. Um, and there's you change form throughout here, throughout the book, the sample that I've seen.
Yeah,
Um,
I wrote in different forms. I'd say most commonly wrote in free verse, but you know, I wrote a pantoum, wrote a couple of sonnets. I mean, old-fashioned sonnets, not broken sonnets. Um,
mm,
I, I put a Shakespearean sonnet through a computer program and then worked that through into something kind of comical and, for me anyway, fun. Um, I even riffed on a nursery rhyme. So I was looking for different ways of making my poems kind of do what they're saying they want to do. And when I could find a form that reinforced that, I'd use it. Um, I wrote a gazelle. So excuse me, a gazelle. So there were various forms that I looked at. I also wrote a couple of bicameral poems where they're basically split on the page and you can read them um, either down the right side, down the left side, or you can combine the two and read them. Um,
mhm.
so yeah, those are the kind of forms that I employed here and there. But I'd say, that was maybe, I don't know, a third or less of the poems.
So, and that's just trying it out and seeing if something worked for you, or if you could, you, does it? You start a form, and then do you think about why am I using this form through the poem? Like, I don't know if there's an example of that here, but at Front Royal, there's a lot of weird rhymes. What would you call that? It's four stand 1, 2, 3, 4 at Front Royal. Four stanzas of 4 lines. That's kind of classical.
Yeah, so it was A, A. BB, CC, DD, right? Those are the first 8 lines. Then uh, in the third stanza, the rhyme scheme um, kind of starts to break down. Mean and
Hmm.
deciphering.
I know, I like that.
It's an imperfect rhyme, and then the last 2 words don't rhyme. But then the rhyme scheme gets restored in the final. A rhyme scheme appears in the final stanza, um, but it's A B
A,
C
B,
B C
C,
B,
B. Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's right.
So it restores a rhyme scheme, but it's a different kind of rhyme scheme. And I just wrote the poem, but I was okay with how the rhymes worked out because the poem is trying to move from sort of a struggle to find your name, to find a regularity, maybe, or a lineage, into something that ends up being a new relationship. So the story of this poem was my family didn't know where our family name Fadely came from. And my father, my late father, um, started to do a lot of genealogical snooping around. And then that kind of went into genealogical research. And part of the snooping around was um, we were often going to see um, my maternal relatives, and we'd drive through Maryland down through the Shenandoah Valley to Roanoke, Virginia, which is kind of roughly in the southwest corner of Virginia, up in the hills, towards the Appalachians. And one trip we stopped at this town Front Royal back when there were still white pages. And
Hmm.
I remember really clearly seeing page after page of Fadleys. And so we thought that we'd found the mother lode, this is must be where the Fadleys were from. There were some Fadleys in the Baltimore area, not many. Um, some number of generations ago, I guess it was maybe speculated that there had been an elopement and kind of a breaking off, um, an elopement up to Maryland, maybe from the Shenandoah Valley. So anyway, we thought we had found where the Fadleys came from. These people who'd, fought in the Revolutionary War and the Civil War and all that. So great. My father then went from there and did some more genealogical research. He passed away, and then Ancestry.com and 23andMe came along. So I got a call from my sister one day saying, would you know, subscribe to 23andMe, see what it says about your ancestry? And I was like, yeah, sure. What's up? She said, well, we did this and we realized that we have Jewish ancestry. I'm like, yeah, what do you mean? I mean, we knew of no Jewish person on our father's side. But his sister was testing about, I think, 30% or so Jewish ancestry, Eastern European Jewish ancestry.
Mm.
So we all tested, and it showed up in all of us kind of proportionally. So it must have been that we're not Fadleys because the people who come up as being my genetic relatives on 23andMe have names like Cohen. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure I would knock on these people's door. I think maybe they would call the cops or something. But you know, it just goes to show that, we're not who we thought we were. I mean, our genetic name is not Fadley. So I contain itinerant soil really means, to put it crudely, my great grandmother probably conceived my grandfather not with her husband who was not Jewish, but rather with another man who was. And
Ooh.
the circumstances of that um, are unknown. Was it
Yeah.
consensual or was it not consensual? No one knows. We only know that my great grandfather was some sort of businessman. He traveled a lot. She was at home for long periods of time. And so, who knows what happened? And back then, of course, you know, medical advances being, what they are, nobody, and we had no indication that my grandfather knew that he was genetically um, roughly half Jewish. So this poem is about that. So you look and you look and you look and you think you found the answer, and it turns out you haven't. So what does
Yeah.
that mean about connection? So I found someone who had the same name as me, John Fadely, and is an older gentleman actually who, showed up in the phone book, and I looked him up and I wrote him because those days, you could list your address in the phone book, and that was the best way of finding someone. And he wrote back. Um, but he and I are not genetically related, unbeknownst to both of us, right? And,
Yeah.
and does that matter? Does
Yeah,
that
that's what
really,
I
does
got
that
from it.
really, does
Yeah.
that really even matter in the end? Does any of this matter? Or, maybe it's just the human connection is what really matters. So the poem is about that experience, and hopefully a little bit of that comes through in the poem, but that's at least what, kind of inspired me to write it.
So just so you know, this is what I got from it was I wrote, what does it mean? What is meant by a family name? That's that that's the question that came out of reading the poem. What's meant by a family name? It's our it's our surname. Uh, Another way to say it is a family name, our last name. And what does that what does that really mean? Are we all? Yeah, you weren't connected. Because if you would have said, if he had said, and he gave huge revelation into our family, that would have been a different ending to this poem if he had
Yeah, I
actually
mean,
related.
and I guess, come to think of it, it's not completely unrelated to the poem Where I'm From, which says a lot about where I'm not from. I'm not from here, I'm not from there, but in this sound we can meet, right? So
Yeah,
again, trying to find places where I can connect with people who bothered to read what I wrote, right? I mean, this is a connection that, one can create. Maybe I think there's a lot of inheritance to it. And I have some poems that I write about sort of you always write in a tradition, whether you know it or not, how aware you are of it is another matter, but you're always writing in a tradition. You're not writing something, kind of that's cut from whole cloth, but you are
yeah. There's
creating,
another poem that yeah, you
you
specifically
are
said that.
creating something. Yes, you are creating something, and it's a new pathway to connect with other people. So I think both of those poems are about that.
And then there's a poem called Plagiarism, which I think is definitely about not whatever we write is never uh, created straight from whole cloth. I really got that from that poem. This one, I thought of Frost, stopping by woods in a snowy evening. It just has a little bit of that um, start to it. It's more formal than some of the other ones,
Yeah.
and it did take me back. The white pages, and the rhyming, it felt a lot more classical, like Frost, who we often make fun of for being too obvious, but there's a nice ambiguity in here as well. We found our name, so the plural is in the beginning, and then it becomes the I. So time has passed, and you're not the child you were of your parents. You become the person looking for this yourself, which is pretty interesting. Come that far in 16 lines is pretty interesting. Just with that slight change of point of view from the hour to we found our name to I finally wrote.
Well,
Great,
you're on
great.
your own. So when you're with your family, and we were together, right, on a trip to see my mother's parents. We were all together in the car. I mean, we'd done the trip countless times and zipped right past Front Royal without even noticing it. It's just a nondescript little town in the Shenandoah Valley.
Uh-huh.
So we were together, and so we made the discovery together. But
Yeah.
when we were kind of stripped of our name, when it was sort of washed away from us, I think each of us is then to some extent on our own in terms of what do we want to do to to fill that void. My sister, for example, I think she wants to do more, research. Um, I'm not that into that. I kind of feel like, okay, I understand this and, understand it
Mhm.
well enough. And so I ended up writing this poem.
Yeah,
So, at
you know
some
that's
point when the ties that bind dissolve like that, you're kind of, other people are always in the picture, but you kind of have to make your own decision about where you want to go with it.
yeah, yeah, and you had some knowledge. You had a preconceived idea of who you were, the Dar and all that. The daughters of class class East Coast family. It's interesting. Um, I do want to talk a little bit more about the I, the voice that you're using. Um, uh, this one definitely that has a change from the we to I, which I really did find interesting. But the Laundry King, for example, uh, the notes you make to yourself, the epistemology notes, seem like you're speaking in the I voice, but um, is it's not always the Laundry King. So would you say that are you using intentionally using multiple voices in this one because it's a little bit longer poem in the Laundry King?
The Laundry King is a character that I invented.
Right,
Um,
right.
he's maybe an anti-hero, right? I mean, he's associated with laundromats, coin operated in particular, laundromats. Um, but also with money, with coins, which are, about disappearing at this point, with laundering. Um, there is a voice that I use here that isn't really wholly my voice, but yeah, I do at times lapse into um, a voice that, let's say, is much closer to my own. Like when I tell the Laundry King to get lost, for example, that's a different voice. And yeah, it did serve to extend the poem a little bit. One thing, we have a group called Long Po that just, meets hour and a half. We're part of it now. Um, a week, and we've read a bunch of long poems. And one of the questions we always ask is, you know, um, what's the strategy that a poet uses to write a long poem? And maybe why even write one? What are the benefits? I mean, Zukowski, who, we're reading together now, said something to the effect of there are no long poems, they're just good lines. Um, so I took a series of kind of fragments that I'd written and realized that I could kind of piece them together into a somewhat longer poem, and that different voices would emerge, that I could use um, different strategies to write each section, and also that I could weave a story um, about a laundromat that turns into a furniture shop, that turns into an internet data center, and then is really a money laundering center. um, that I could weave that in. So I gave it a try, and it seems to be about the right length, I guess, for what I want to say. I mean, I think it maybe runs about 8 pages or so. That's the longest thing I've ever written. And certainly, I could only write something that long as a series of vignettes.
Uh, Do you think, I mean, consciously, um, were you really trying to speak in the voice of the Laundry King? Or there's a bit of snark here. Um, you've made him an anti-hero. You know, he's confessing in some ways.
Money is everywhere, and whether we like it or not, um, even in the poetry game. And certainly, I've spent my career as a private funds lawyer, representing clients raising capital from investors and representing investors in those funds. So money has kind of been woven into my professional life. I don't see many people writing directly about money in the poetry world. It has been done. I mean, everything's been done. Um, but I wanted to sort of pause as someone who has different background and give, my perspective on money. You know, w- what is it? How do you deal with it? And ultimately, the poem ends with the line, declare a new currency. You kind of have to find a new store of value for yourself, that's beyond money. I think we all do, no matter
Hmm?
what our relationship is with money. And so I was trying to get to that point. I felt like the poem needed to end when I got to that point, and that's why it ends with that line.
Yeah, yeah, that is good, and I kind of I missed that part, but I did enjoy having it because I really like those page. Well, it's at the page end here, and you write that's the slogan that you'll see all the time. Most often I would see it in print shops because I did a lot of graphic design where it's you can either have it fast, cheap, or good, and you can't have all three. You can only have two of those.
Right.
So that
The tri the
yeah,
the tri the tri trilemmas are great.
yeah,
Um,
trilemmas are great. Yeah.
yeah.
And and I mean this is a place you could have I really thought it was a great end. This is why for the last person there will be nothing to do with all that money but sleep on it. And you hope it's made out of a nice, durable paper that will crumble up well and be comfortable because it's about trade. It has to be between people, or it's not worth anything. The last person. What a great thought.
Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. So, but you go on, and you declare a new currency. Um, there's there's some references in here to um, probably like a Bitcoin, right? Is there some? Are you thinking about that in here? I mean, I was getting kind of a
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, even at the beginning, there was a reference um, to that with the line, now I'm decimalized, now I'm alphanumeric strings. There's just different forms that money takes. I sing the Dollar Electric. This is this is all about Bitcoin, which is both, through the blockchain, a way to trace money laundering more effectively, but also, no pun intended, by the same token, uh, a
hiding it.
means that money launderers have used to launder money. As lawyers, we're required to take every year the same course on money laundering prevention. Um, so that was actually part of the inspiration for this poem. I had to take that course, and you're
Mm,
usually given a couple of weeks to do it online. And I did it for the umpteenth time, and then thought, I should write something about all the learning that I've gained through the, dozen or so times that I've taken the same money laundering course.
okay. Tell me, lesson in here about money laundering. Where is it? I didn't. This did not sound too. You weren't, you know, warning me. You weren't. This isn't telling me what to do poem. I like that about it.
Yeah, sure. So the story in the laundromat begins with a person who first spots a woman switching out one person's laundry seemingly for another person's laundry. And then that person, the speaker, ends up trying on a sweatshirt from a school I've never heard of and wearing it still warm out the door.
Yeah,
Are
yeah.
you the same person when you leave as you were when you first got there, or are you kind of being laundered in this strange place? Then the next week, the dryer spins my clothes into cash, which I take to a counter and exchange for a gold Buddha statue. This money launderers do this sort of thing all the time. Maybe not with gold Buddha statues, but you're always trying to take something, an ill-gotten gain, right? Disguise it,
Uh-huh.
run it through the system, and then exit in some other untraceable form from the system, right? So
Yeah.
that you can keep your ill-gotten gain. This, so this then happens, and then you notice that the the coin wash has been changed to a furniture store. Looks like something strange is going on here. Maybe criminal activity, poetic. It's not just poetic magic, it's criminal activity. And and then you end up with this kind of weird scene where, the speaker's returning to this place. He's kind of looking for answers. I mean, maybe facetiously searching for enlightenment because gold Buddha statues happen to be involved.
Uh-huh.
And he kind of has to, play the game of, pick what's behind door one, two, or three. Um, each of his choices is a different version of a gold Buddha statue, only one of which is solid gold. Um, and that's the next to last scene. He returns one more time in search of enlightenment, which he didn't really find through playing that game, and encounters the same woman who opens the door and just tells him that we've gone online.
Uh-huh.
No use keeping a physical location anymore, too easily traceable, right? We're online now. So there's definitely some money laundering going on here.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, some funny business, and towards the end of the poem, there's a launderer of souls, a laundry king, launder the K in trafficking. So, you know, there's all kinds of laundering going on. Some of it truly dangerous and horrific. Like after the money's gone, barters, brutal equivalents, things for things, persons as things, life as a series of trade-offs. Money laundering is, one of the ways that all kinds of criminal activity is facilitated, including human trafficking. So, this poem is maybe in a kind of a lighthearted, facetious way, touching on all of these things, some of which are trivial, some of which are not at all trivial. Um,
Well,
and
yeah, and there's a morality in these small exchanges, and the Laundry King didn't invent human trafficking, but he may be getting some benefit from it.
right,
So it's a really interesting thing that, but it just in our normal life, how do we get sucked into something that is immoral, and how do we deal with it? That was what I got out of it. And it's really as you said, in a lighthearted way. The language is fun. Uh, did you
yeah,
write
the
this?
language, yeah, the language plays some games. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, yeah, it's really, I love that. And I was going to ask, you said you wanted to write it in vignettes. So you wrote it over time, or did you write this all in one go, or?
I wrote it more or less in one go, but I was keeping notes, maybe over, I don't know, a month or so. I'm not a person who writes every day. I don't have that kind of practice. I practice law, so that's kind of my daily practice. But when I feel like writing, I just, jot something down, right? And the advantage of that for me sometimes is that I can look at patterns. If I keep coming back to the same topic, but maybe from a slightly different perspective each time, maybe a poem can kind of emerge out of that. And that's what happened here.
Okay. And so the both the notes maybe had some breaks in them like this, or did you was there quite a bit of revision?
So it wasn't clear to me how to sequence the different mini poems, if you will. Um,
Okay.
so I had to put some thought into that. It was kind of clear how to begin, how to end, and that there was a story that was going to be kind of interlaced through all of it. Um, then the rest of it was just kind of experimenting um, with, what seemed to work. And, one of the ways that I did that was reading it just silently. And then eventually I read it out loud a few times just to try to get a sense of whether I could sustain a tone and some tonal
Mm.
variation and whether it seems to work towards something with enough variety not to be monotonous, but with enough consistency to kind of make sense. And just taking those as my guideposts, I kind of figured out a sequence that I thought worked and went with that.
Yeah, that's good. Do you usually do much in the way of revision, or you kind of a purist like to leave what the thought was, what you put on the page? And I'm going
Oh,
to ask
yeah,
hold on, one question before this.
sure.
Do you write these down with a pen and paper, or do you type?
I type.
Okay.
I've always got an iPhone nearby and I just use notes and then I'll usually take those and, send them to a laptop and eventually get them into a Word document. Um,
Do
but,
you
hardly.
speak, or do you use the mic, or do you type?
I usually use the mic if there's no one around.
Okay.
If there's someone around, I'll type. Uh,
This is
and
really interesting. I mean, this really influences practice. That's why I ask. And then, so the question was about revision, but I did want to know where you started from.
well, yeah, I start from there because what I try to do is if there's something that pops into my head that I think maybe has a future as a poem, I just want to get it down as quickly as possible because a lot of these just kind of they're quite fleeting. A lot of these thoughts they maybe have a certain there's an idea in there. There's maybe an emotional kind of valence. There's maybe an image or a rhythm. There's something about it that I think maybe, has poetic legs. So I want to see if I can take it and run with it. So I just want to get it down first. I'm not worried about anything else. It's just a matter of recording it. It might take me 10 seconds, 30 seconds, a minute at most. And I don't worry about how good it is. I just get the fragment down and I'll work with it later. I revise a lot. For this book. I started out in 2019 as someone who hadn't written poetry since college. Um, I won't say how many how many years that intervening gap was, but I'm in my mid 50s, so let's just say that
It was a while. Okay.
it was a while. So a lot of the topics that I started writing about were topics that I really wanted to address in the book once it became clear that I could actually have a book. So I reworked those poems. So the earlier stuff that I wrote, I reworked much more than the later things because I actually got more efficient, if you will, as a writer as I went along. I'm still not efficient. My aim is not to be efficient necessarily. It's just to write the best stuff that I can write. But for me, involved that involved more revisions for the earlier stuff than the later stuff.
Okay. So,
Um,
like, what's an example of an earlier piece?
At Front Royal is a piece that got totally reworked.
Okay, that's
Um,
earlier. Okay.
Also, Burnt Offering, which I read, got completely reworked and condensed. Um, The Laundry King is something that I wrote towards the end of the process of writing the book.
Good. I can see that. That's pretty cool. Um, uh, so we've we've gone on for uh, longer than most people will probably give us attention for. So did just want to ask you what what do you read or
Well,
otherwise get influenced by,
yeah.
except besides money laundering courses.
Well, we kind of trundle along pretty slowly in ModPo, but we read things together that are longer and frankly, I think for most of us, intimidating to read on our own because of the length and complexity. That's been great. Right now we're reading Louis Zukowski's A. We've read everyone from Stevens through to Ashbery, Charles Olson, Marianne Moore, T.S. Eliot, Pounds, Cantos. We've done a lot of stuff in the last 4 years. That's been great. Almost 4 years now, I guess. On my own, I read a bit too. Obviously, read things that are shorter. Some of the poets that I've enjoyed the most recently, Peter Gizzi, um, James Richardson, who was actually one of my creative writing instructors in college, is a fantastic poet. Goes by James Richardson. I think he just had something published in the Paris Review last fall, and he's coming out with a new book. He's in his 70s now, and he's a very, I would say, there's a certain amount of quietness in his poems that you don't find with many people, and he's a great, from my perspective, a great craftsman. When I read him, I just really enjoy the experience. Um, John Yao, um, whose pantoums in particular, I really enjoy. Um, yeah, several other poets too, but those are the ones that I've been reading recently.
Do you read John Yao's art blog? He is one of the founders of Hyperallergic, which is a blog about visual art.
I don't read that. I have to admit that,
Hyperallergic.
his expertise in the visual arts is mostly lost on me, although a lot of it comes through in his poetry and some of the imagery
Yeah.
that he uses. But he's truly a master of the pantoum and usually turns to it at least a couple times in his books, and I've
Oh,
learned a lot from him. And he was the inspiration for writing the pantoum that I wrote, John Yao.
cool.
Yeah.
So do you read nonfiction or fiction?
I read a little bit of nonfiction too. I mean, reading time is somewhat limited by my job, so, I have to take my time where I can. Right now, I just started reading a book called Waste Wars, which talks about what happens to our garbage.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Okay, good. Uh, I don't have any gathering paradise, but you can gather some paradise if you want. Um,
Uh,
in Modpo, there's a the Kelly Writers House puts out the what is it, poem talk, and they always the participants all come together with something they think is really cool out in the world today. And it comes from
right.
the Emily Dickinson poem. Let's gather a little bit of paradise in our little hands and spread the word.
Well, I would give a plug to my old teacher, Jim Richardson.
Okay.
Um, Now, he's, I think, kind of a known quantity. I mean, he was a National Book Award finalist for a book called By the Numbers in 2010, which is a great book. And he has this great approach to aphorisms where he will write really short poems or a series of lines or poems. I mean, I don't mean to kind of mangle my explanation of what he does, but if you're into aphorisms and really short poems, um,
Mm.
he's fantastic. He wrote another book called um, For Now that came out in 2020. I don't know the name of his book that's coming out next year, but he said he's going to have new poems as well as collected work.
Good to hear. That's a new, a new person for me. Thanks.